Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers. We begin with Bilateral Ties, where Nigerian President Bola Tinubu has continued his drive to attract investments and economic development into the country as he held a meeting with the South African President, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, in New York City on the sidelines of the 78th United Nations General Assembly. In a statement after the meeting, the spokesperson to the President, UNGA, stated that President Tinubu had made the case for Africa to insist that the hundreds of billions of dollars spent through international development finance institutions over the years must meet the specific needs of developing democracies on the continent. Our correspondent, Lasisi, reports.
President Bola Tinubu arriving for what turned out to be a day of meetings. His first meeting with one of the leaders who had arrived in New York for the 78th United Nations General Assembly is with the South African President, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa. The spokesperson to President Tinubu, Ajuri Ngalale, in a statement after the meeting, said President Tinubu had discussed the need for funds spent through international development finance institutions to meet the specific needs of developing democracies in Africa. According to the statement, President Tinubu said, "Democracy without food on the table is a breeding ground for what will consume us if care is not taken. We must join hands and agree that international finance institutions require reform, as Africa is not a ground for economic scavenging any longer, but it is a place with gifted people that is ready for investment and cooperation." The South African president is said to have agreed that the two countries have much more wealth to create together in close and intentional partnership, with each country leveraging on each other's respective strengths. Following this meeting, the president met with some governors led by the chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum, Governor Abdulrazak Abdurrahman of Kwara State. After the meeting, the governor spoke on the benefit of their presence at the 78th United Nations General Assembly.
There are several engagements, side meetings, side events, many on education, SDG, healthcare, which the countries are engaging in. And the subnational are also engaging in all side events as well.
The Minister of Solid Minerals, Mr. Dele Alake, also had a meeting with some potential investors in the Nigerian solid mineral industry.
I have assured him and the rest of the investing globe that Nigeria is ready and open to serious time investors. And we are creating all the conducive conditions and putting in incentives and environments via security, stepping up the security around the mining sites, putting in governance structure, very effective and efficient governance structure.
Many more bilateral engagements are expected in the days ahead as officials meet with counterparts from different countries. From New York, Lanre for Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, world leaders and ministers have been engaging in high-level UN discussions in New York amid the need to build global collections and government leaders. Our correspondent, Maria Bird, has more.
The 78th UN General Assembly high-level meetings open with a focus on climate change, health inequality, and the need to address security issues across the world. The world is watching as the summit works to address global challenges with hunger and poverty that have been heightened as a result of a health pandemic and war.
Despite commitments to eradicate poverty and to reduce hunger being at the core of this agenda, alarmingly, 1.2 billion people were still living in multidimensional poverty.
The SDGs aren't just a list of goals. They carry the hopes, dreams, rights, and expectations of people everywhere. Yet today, only 15% of the targets are on track, and many are going in reverse.
Despite the Assembly's plans to pick up the pace on implementing development efforts across the world, many convened in New York City in front of the UN building protesting the government. These anti-government protests focused on dissatisfaction with government leadership. New York City is one of the largest cities in the world with over 8.5 million people and continues to serve the UN General Assembly with extended security and increased accessibility to government leaders and ministers that are attending the 78th UN General Assembly, with an intentional focus on reaching the UN 2030 agenda. From New York City, Maria Bird, Channels Television News.
Well, let's bring in our correspondent, Larry Lasisi, who joins us now from New York. Hello, Larry.
Hello, I'm not sure how good the audio is from my end. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. If you can hear me, I'm sure it's been a busy couple of days since you landed in New York with all the meetings going on, all the speeches, going on. So give us an update, on the UN General Assembly and what's been the highlight so far.
I'm having a little audio issue here, so I'll just give you a little rundown of what is happening here right now while we're waiting for the time when President Bola Tinubu will be having his own opportunity to address world leaders at the 78th United Nations General Assembly. We've been having bilateral meetings here, and all is in readiness for him to leave where he is right now, make his way to where the afternoon session. I'm sure you're aware he's going to be having. He was going to be addressing during the afternoon session. So that is what we will be looking forward to. As I'm sure you're aware, part of what we're told is his speech will be looking at some of the need for the world global infrastructure to see how they can pull in the developing nations, to see how they can also get a seat on the table to attract more financing to aid development in their country. We're all looking forward to the president's speech. Will be coming later in the day. He's scheduled to be the 12th speaker in the afternoon session. Well, that's what I have for now.
Right. If you can hear me, maybe you can listen a little bit more. Can you give us the highlight of, what the U.S. President Joe Biden spoke about some time ago? He gave his speech a little over 2 hours ago. Do you have the highlights of what he said? That's the U.S. President Joe Biden.
I'm sorry, I'm having a little problem with my audio.
All right, we'll connect with Larry later on. Larry Lasisi is one of Channel TV's correspondents covering the UN General Assembly, part of the crew that traveled to New York to give us a robust coverage of this year's meeting. We'll try and get back to that if we can, to get more from our correspondents. But let's just move on to other stories. And over in Libya, where 7 people have been killed in a tragic road accident, footage shows a burnt bus on the side of the road next to scattered debris surrounded by onlookers. According to Greek Defense Minister Nikos Dendias, among those killed are 5 members of a Greek humanitarian aid mission and 2 civilians. 3 days of national mourning was announced in the Greek armed forces to honor the aid workers who died. More tragedy. A week after the flood that swept the city center of Derna into the sea, Libyans are dissatisfied with authorities' handling of the crisis. Hundreds of residents gathered outside the Al-Shahaba Mosque in protest against the government for the number of dead and missing citizens, a tragedy most feel could have been avoided.
Hundreds of people in this crowd, in front and on the roof of the Al-Shahaba Mosque, clapping, chanting, and holding up banners. Dams above the city burst in a storm a week ago, sending a huge torrent down a seasonal riverbed that bisects the city of 120,000 people at its center. Officials using different methods have arrived at widely varying figures of the death toll so far. The mayor estimates more than 20,000 people were lost, while the World Health Organization has confirmed 3,922 deaths. Meanwhile, workers wearing hazmat suits sanitized the streets of Derna as part of a campaign organized by the Libyan government to avoid the spread of diseases. The head of Oxygen Campaign to manage medical waste in the eastern city, Faisal Al-Zayani, says the situation is currently stable and under control, but fears the lack of medical staff can create a crisis. Entire districts of Derna were swept away or buried in brown mud after both dams were destroyed, flooding a usually dry riverbed. The World Health Organization representative in Libya is concerned about the health risks posed by unrecovered bodies, saying there's a real risk among those who have survived.
I think that there will be incommunicable diseases spreading from the dead. Communicable diseases can start from the survivors if they don't have access to safe water, if they don't have access to safe food. We might start to see some cases of foodborne and waterborne diseases. There is need to get medical equipment, medicine, and medical teams to some remote areas also. That can happen either through fixed facilities or through mobile clinics. WHO is already working on importing some mobile clinics. We are working already on taking the medicine and the medical equipment that arrived yesterday and the day before to as close as possible to the population.
Search teams say a total of 283 bodies have been recovered from the sea since searches began, and there are many left to find. A Libyan citizen is desperately trying to find the missing family of his Syrian in-laws with the help of a Russian rescue team in flood-hit Derna, more than a week after the flood. Members of the rescue team had been scavenging through the rubble of a building in which Walid al-Sheikh says his in-laws were last heard from. Unfortunately, rescue teams are increasingly finding only parts of bodies as they disintegrate. State media says at least 891 buildings have been destroyed in the city, and as many as 20,000 people have died. Some humanitarian assistance has arrived from international sources. The United Arab Emirates has sent aid to a sorting facility in Karsa to help victims of flooding that hit Derna. The supplies, consisting of food and shelter materials, are sorted by members of the Libyan Red Crescent. A member of the Emirati Red Crescent, Ahmad Al-Hajeri, says they will be distributed around Derna.
Back, it's a lot of excitement for children in Morocco as they return to school in a number of towns and villages after a deadly earthquake struck the country more than a week ago. Lessons resumed on Monday in the towns of Amizmiz and Asni in the High Atlas Mountains and some villages in the Tarudant province in the southwest. According to the Education Department, about 150 special tents equipped with teaching supplies and essentials have been set up by local authorities for classes to take place. Meanwhile, around 6,000 students enrolled in schools in 6 municipalities most affected by the disaster are being transported to schools in the nearby city of Marrakesh. Teachers and students have expressed a sense of optimism and determination following the gestures by the authorities. For the the first time in 5 months since fighting erupted in Sudan's capital, Khartoum, clashes between the two rival factions of the Sudanese army and has spread to the Red Sea city of Port Sudan. According to reports, Sudanese soldiers exchanged fire with members of a tribal militia group which calls itself the Forces of the Eastern Sudan Parties and Movements Alliance. The clashes come after the Sudanese troops tried to remove checkpoints set up by the group on Monday in the Port Sudan, a city that hosts the country's only functional airports. Violence between the Sudanese army and the rapid support forces have left thousands killed and displaced since conflict broke out in April. And in neighboring South Sudan, where protests have erupted in Parliament over a bill establishing the path for long-awaited nationwide elections in the country. A faction of the country's governing party walked out of the chamber as the legislation was passed. Lawmakers accused President Salva Kiir of breaching provisions of a peace deal signed in 2018. Members of the Sudan People's Liberation Movement, loyal to Mr. Kiir's rival and Deputy Riek Machar, said the National Election Act made the electoral process undemocratic, unfair, and not credible. The U.S. Deputy Treasury Secretary Wale Adeyemo has assured Nigeria that his country is committed to maintaining a strong relationship as part of efforts to transform the country's economy. He made the remarks during a visit to the country where he met with officials and business leaders at the Lagos Business School, where discussions centered on avenues for increased trade with a focus on areas such as energy, agriculture, technology, and finance.
Business leaders from a cross-section of Nigeria's financial and media industries gather at the instance of the United States Deputy Secretary of Treasury, Mr. Wale Adeyemo's visit. Mr. Adeyemo comes as a representative of his president, Mr. Joe Biden, to share the commitment of the United States to strong and mutually beneficial relationship with Nigeria. He highlights steps which Nigeria could take to optimize its economic potential.
Nigeria needs a stable naira. You stop into any small business or market and you will hear shop owners and customers bemoaning the lack of a stable currency. Unifying Nigeria's foreign exchange rate will also create the kind of macroeconomic stability that is essential to attracting foreign investment. We commend the difficult steps your government has already taken to accomplish this goal. The path to unification is not an easy one, as everyone is experiencing, but going backwards would be even worse. Second, the government needs to articulate and implement a credible fiscal strategy that will provide the resources to make critical investments. I recognize the decision to end fuel subsidies is hard for many Nigerian households, but it was an important early step to create resources the government can use to invest in fiscal and digital infrastructure, education, and a strong small business environment. There is nowhere this need is greater than the agricultural industry, which despite the digital revolution going on in Nigeria, remains Nigeria's top employer.
The points were further elaborated during a question and answer session.
This economy is slipping. Multi-dimensional poverty is going through the roof. So how bullish is your government in dealing with this problem?
Great, thank you. So you have At the end of the event, the host, the Vice-Chancellor of the Pan-Atlantic University, Dr. Ignacio Konedo, lists key takeaways from the session.
We are happy that he chose the Lagos Business School to come and share the thoughts. It's always very important to understand how our largest trading partners as a nation, what they're thinking and the ways in which they can contribute and work together with us in order that we grow economically and socially. So for him to choose this platform to come and make this speech that reiterates the commitment, I think that that's fantastic. And if anything else, it gives us the assurance that as we pursue economic growth, as we pursue security, as we pursue stability across the nation and indeed across the region, that we are not alone, we're working with very strong partners.
As the global economic landscape becomes increasingly interconnected, the significance of such high-level dialogues cannot be overstated, as it not only symbolizes the strength and resilience of US-Nigeria economic relations, but also catalyzes future collaborations that could shape the economic destinies of countries.
Elsewhere now, former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo says Prince Mangosuthu Buthelez's death is a big loss for Africa. Mangosuthu Buthelezi served as Chief Minister of KwaZulu-Natal during the apartheid period, founded the Inkatha Freedom Party in 1975 and led it until 2019. He was succeeded as party president in 2019 by Velenkosini Labisa. Mr. Buthelezi died on September 9 at the age of 95. President Obasanjo called on the people of the African continent to continue honoring him and holding him in high regard. The former statesman hopes that there will be reconciliation between Inkatha Freedom Party and the African National Congress. He was speaking to Channels Television's news correspondent Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg, South Africa.
I've known him from when he was in ANC, when he broke away from ANC, and the issue between ANC and himself, the issues were not very well known by many people. And when he came to us in Nigeria in the 1970s, when the issue between him and ANC leaders were going on, he explained to us. And when I saw Madiba, Nelson Mandela, in Portsmouth prison, and we were talking about things, President Nelson Mandela described him as a freedom fighter in his own right. And he said, yes, the objectives are the same, but the means are different. As I see him, he is probably the last, what one will call the last of the Mohicans. The last of the real early ones who started fighting apartheid when it came up in mid-1940s. And what I saw yesterday also was glorious. People loved him. People showed that they loved him. And the present president of Inkatha Freedom Party talk about reconciliation. The president of the Republic of South Africa, President Ramaphosa, talk about reconciliation. And in fact, before Buthelezi died, he said to me he would want to have his party membership card of ANC back. Well, death has not made that possible, but we hope that for the benefit of this country and indeed for the benefit of Africa, that there will be reconciliation between IFP and ANC.
And finally on the program, if you've not added the island of Jabba to your vacation bucket list, then you just might want to consider it, as the United Nations Cultural Agency, UNESCO, has added it to its World Heritage List. Gaining UNESCO recognition often boosts tourism and can make it easier to secure funds for the preservation of cultural sites. The island, which is off the coast of Tunisia, is famed for its whitewashed villages and aesthetic pleasing environment. Star Wars movies have also been filmed on Jabba, and it was said to be the home of lotus eaters in Homer's ancient Greek epic poem, The Odyssey. That's our program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joker Rogers.